You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, everybody. How are we all? And welcome to another educational and entrancing episode of Haunted Histories here on Parasearch Radio with yours truly, Penny G. Morgan. This week, I'm lucky enough to be joined by a member of the Haunted Happenings team, Julie Heseltine, who will be talking about the infamous Galleries of Justice in Nottingham. It's a place that is on my to-do list to visit one day, so I'm sure she will make me want to go even more than I do already. Talking about to-do lists for investigations, I got to tick another one off last week. I won't tell you too much at this stage, as Kerry Greenaway and I will be probably doing a show on my exploits in the not-too-distant future. But Kelvedon Hatch, the not-so-secret nuclear bunker, you didn't disappoint. It's not every day that you get told by a 22-year-old RAF military policeman that he wants to take you out for dinner. And that's not the half of it. I am positively itching to tell you about some of the things that happen, but I won't. Always leave them wanting more, to paraphrase P.T. Barnum. As I said, tonight we're going to the Galleries of Justice in Nottingham. I've heard so much from people about this place that I felt I had to look into it, and to be honest, the more I read, the more excited I got to have about this show. So what exactly are the Galleries of Justice? Well, the National Justice Museum, which was formerly called the Galleries of Justice Museum, also known as the Shire Hall, is an independent museum and charity in the Lace Market area of Nottingham in England. The museum is housed in what was once a Victorian courtroom, jail and police station, and is therefore a historic site where an individual could be arrested, sentenced and executed, all in one place. The courtrooms, though, date back even further to the 1300s, and the jail to at least 1449. The building was also used as a police station from 1905 to 1985, with the courts actually closing as recently as 1986. So, a place where you could be kept, tried and then executed without having to even leave its four walls. When we talk with Julie shortly, we will talk about this, but we'll also talk about some of the different areas of the building and what they have brought from a paranormal perspective. But the time when this building seemed to have been most heavily used was during the Victorian era. Now, for a crime historical period, the reign of Queen Victoria marks somewhat of an epoch when it came to dealing with crime and punishment. Although the Victorians very firmly believed in punishing criminals, they faced a problem. What should the punishment be? One attempt to stop the growth of crime had been through making punishment severe, hanging or transportation, for example. However, since the end of the 1700s, many people had become more and more angry at the number of people hanged for petty crimes. By the time Queen Victoria came to the throne, fewer crimes carried a compulsory death sentence. There were fewer hangings and sentences for petty crime, there were fewer hangings, and the sentences for petty crime were getting lighter. In their place, other ideas were being tried out. This included building new jails and looking at how these could be used to stop criminals from reoffending in the future. Transportation, for example, was often used instead of hanging for the more serious crime. But what types of punishment actually were there? Well, obviously death was the most extreme, and this was still by hanging. During the 1700s, interesting enough, there were around 200 crimes that were punishable by hanging. Those would be what we would now see as incredibly minor offences, such as stealing bread or pickpocketing. The other observation that was made by those able to voice such opinions was that these hangable crimes were committed by those in poverty, so much so that there was civil unrest brewing at the amount of hangings for such insignificant crimes. It was still a public event, though, hangings. Thomas Cook used to run excursion trains, believe it or not, to promising executions. 30,000 people, for example, watched the hanging of a notorious pair of murderers in 1849, including the infamous Charles Dickens, who watched from the roof of a house overlooking the gallows. He then famously sent a letter to the Times condemning public executions and their use as popular entertainment. It took another 20 years before hangings would be conducted within prison walls. In 1823, Sir Robert Peel reduced the number of offences which convicts could be executed by over 100. And in 1830, Lord John Russell abolished the death sentence for stealing horses and for breaking into houses. Peel, if you know your history, was actually the forefather of the modern policing movement, creating the Metropolitan Police in 1829, and they were known as bobbies or peelers. You never know, that might come up in a quiz one day. Another type of punishment was being sent to the colonies. The alternative to hanging being transportation, where convicted criminals were sent to the colonies to serve their sentence. Any criminal with a sentence of 7 years or longer could be transported. Later in the Victorian period, this was actually replaced with something called penal servitude. Under the 1853 Penal Servitude Act, only long-term transportation was retained, and transportation was actually finally abolished completely after the 1857 Penal Servitude Act, although some were still transported after this date. Penal servitude meant serving a sentence that is meant to punish the prisoner. It was a term of imprisonment that usually included hard labour and was actually served in this country, so in the UK. This gradually replaced transportation following the 1853 and 1857 Penal Servitude Acts. From about 1867, any prisoner sentenced with penal servitude would have stayed in Britain. But there's actually also evidence from Fremantle Prison in Australia that prisoners who had served their sentence after deportation could return back to Britain. So if they stayed in the UK, the likely punishment was hard labour. There were several reasons for this. Firstly, it was felt that it would teach prisoners the value of hard work, which was something the Victorians believed very strongly in. Don't forget their whole mantra regarding workhouses, i.e., work makes you a better person. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what it meant. Secondly, it would remove the temptation for idle men to get up to mischief. And thirdly, it would deter others from committing crime. Another reason, though, for hard labour was the need for cheap labour. During the Napoleonic Wars, there was opposition to transportation because labour was needed in the dockyards. Men incarcerated in the hulks, for example. Now, these were floating prisons. These were old warships that were decommissioned and used as prisons. And these men worked on dredging the Thames or in naval dockyards. Others were sentenced to work on ballast lighters. In addition, one of the reasons for sending prisoners to certain areas of Australia in the early days was the actual lack of labourers to support those early settlers. As an element of segregation became part of a prison sentence for both petty and serious crimes, hard labour was actually often carried out in a prisoner's cell or under guard in silence. It was actually, believe it or not, from hard labour that the term treadmill came. No, prisoners weren't forced to go to the gym each day. That would have been quite nice, wouldn't it? But most prisons had a treadmill or tread wheel installed, where the prisoner simply walked the wheel. In some prisons, such as Bedford, in the early part of the 19th century, the treadmill provided flour to make money for the jail, from which the prisoners earned enough to pay for their keep. However, in later times there was no end product, and the treadmill was just walked just for punishment. Unsurprisingly, it became loathed by prisoners. Another equally pointless device was the crank, although some might argue now that the treadmill wasn't pointless and it's a very vital piece of equipment. But anyway, and the crank was just that. It was a very large handle in their cell that a prisoner would have to turn thousands of times a day. This could be tightened by the warders, making it harder to turn, which resulted in their nickname of screws. There you go, you're learning a lot today, aren't you? These punishments were not abolished until 1898. So not only have we learnt where the term bobbies came from, we also know where treadmill comes from, and also the term screws. A way of getting out of some kind of prison sentence was to join the Navy, as people knew how hard the conditions were on board ship. Nobody wanted to sign up. Some prisoners were, therefore, sentenced to serve in the forces. When you look back to the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, albeit this was under George III's reign, not Victoria's, over half the Royal Navy's 120,000 men were believed to be pressmen, i.e. those press-ganged into joining. They were said to have taken the King's shilling, although it wasn't just a case of someone being bribed into joining. Some were literally knocked out through a combination of violence and booze, and found themselves hungover, sore-headed, and aboard a stinking ship bound for God knows where when they woke up. But don't make the mistake of thinking crime paid. No. The fairer sex didn't get off scot-free either. If you look on something like Ancestry.com, you can find some of the following cases. Now, funnily enough, those women convicted of lesser crimes such as theft and domestic housebreaking, often felt the full force of the law. Take 19-year-old Elizabeth Murphy, for example. She was sentenced to 5 years of hard labour in prison and 7 years of police supervision for stealing an umbrella. She served 3 years of her sentence before she received parole in 1887. Dorcas Mary Snell, 45, was sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment with hard labour in 1883 for the theft, wait for this, of a single piece of bacon. She got parole 2 years later. Mary Richards was sentenced to 5 years in 1880 at the age of 59, which was quite old in those days, for stealing 130 oysters valued at 8 shillings, which were the property of a John Tyack. Mary served almost all of the sentence, receiving parole 5 years later. The record also detailed the lengthy and unforgiving sentences given to women who procured abortions, including a Mary Billingham, who was sentenced to 20 years of imprisonment and hard labour in 1875. It would appear, as well, that age was not necessarily taken into consideration when sentences were passed. The youngest female in the records that I could find was an 11-year-old Anne McQuillan, who was convicted in Perth and sentenced to 4 years in prison for theft by housebreaking. The records also detail a number of violent crimes which women were convicted of. Mary Morrison, a 40-year-old servant, threw sulphuric acid over her estranged husband for not paying her weekly allowance, shouting, "Take that! I'll make you worse than you are." She received 5 years in 1883 but served only 3. So her sentence for physically harming someone was actually less than someone got for stealing a piece of bacon. Elizabeth Ann Staunton, at 29, was convicted of the murder of a Harriet Staunton in 1877. Elizabeth was spared the death penalty and instead got sentenced to life. She was granted parole 6 years later. Seems a bit uneven, doesn't it? But then, that's history for you. Okay, shall we get on to the good stuff? Our guest this week is Julie Heseltine of Haunted Happenings, and she has a wealth of experience when it comes to the galleries and what goes on there. Hi Julie, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Good, thank you ever so much for joining us. I like to be a bit nosy with new guests on the show and give people who are listening a chance to get to know them.
Okay.
How did you get into the paranormal?
Many years ago, when I was 17 and working for Bass Brewery, we
Hmm.
went on a staff outing to the brewery in Burton upon Trent, and we was in one of their lovely buildings. And I went upstairs and came around the corner, walking down the beautiful old stairs, and this lovely gentleman came walking by in a big brown hat, big brown bag, and a brown jacket, and he just walked in front of me as, a just complete figure. And as he walked up the stairs, I kind of said hello to him, and he ignored me and walked straight by me. And I thought, how bizarre! It must have been an actor. Went downstairs and just happened to mention to my colleagues about the man that had walked past them, and they had no idea who he was. So
Okay.
to cut a very long story short, I found out a few years ago that I'd actually seen the chemist of the brewery.
Wow.
And lots of people have seen him. A gentleman that's just as solid as a normal figure, just walked in front of me, walked past me, clearly a residual energy,
Yeah.
and didn't even know that I was there. And that started this, what's all that about, And then obviously a few years later, we had the lovely Most Haunted that started on the television, and I kind of looked at that and I thought, quite fancy the Galleries of Justice because it's 5 minutes from where I live.
Uh-huh.
So we went on an event, and that started 14 years of investigating and just going to the most amazing places with haunted happenings.
What an amazing experience, though, to have your first ever. Oh, that's wow. I can't know what to say about that one.
Yeah, and also the fact that this gentleman was completely solid, not the wispy white, cloaked person. He was a full solid person, and
Yeah.
and then to learn many years later about him, and somebody actually described him and said, "Yeah, you've seen the chemist," and he described him to me, the exact person that I'd seen. So that I thought, oh, right, that's quite interesting. But yeah, I went on my first event, and then it's quite addictive. Quite an addictive hobby.
It is, yeah.
And it's just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled, and just means that I just go to investigate some amazing places around England with, obviously haunted happenings, and I get the opportunity to just learn layers and layers of history. My family is very into the history of buildings. The older, the better. And Galleries of Justice being my favourite.
Okay. So where was your first ever investigation?
The Galleries of Justice.
It was actually the galleries. Oh, okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, it was 14 years ago.
Okay. So you've got to know the residual spirits and, well, not even residual spirits, I suppose, the residing spirits there quite well.
Yes. Certainly at the galleries on my first I was very lucky, and I think sometimes that you've got to be in the place at the right moment to see things, especially if it's residual and it's obviously a stone tape theory and playback, because the first event that I went to on the galleries with my husband, most of the night it was quite quiet, and in the morning we used to have sausage cobs, which was wonderful after a full event, and they said, right, go on your own for an hour, Julie, you can go and investigate and come back. So we went down feeling brave, went down to the cell corridor at the Galleries of Justice. I was being a little brave person, went round the corner, pitch black, shone my light up to where the stairs are to go down to the woman's laundry. And there is a figure of a gentleman standing there with black trousers, a red jacket and lovely buttons. So I couldn't see his head because the ceiling was lower in front of me. And as I saw him, I was so shocked, turned, and I can remember just putting my hands over my eyes and saying, my goodness, there's somebody there. And a lovely man from my group just ran past me, and he just said, the legs, and he could see the legs. It was amazing. Again, a full, solid person. So I was quite lucky, rang the curator on Monday at the galleries, said, look, I've seen this. What on earth does this mean? And she looked back and she says it may well have been a guard from the 16th century. Just as simple as that. And fully enough, I've never seen a full-bodied apparition like that since. So it's very rare to see them, but when you see them, very, very powerful and very...
Well, I'll say it's something that most investigators would give their right arm to
Absolutely.
experience a fault, and you've had two.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the really bizarre thing is, a few years later, well, I was again on another event and with Haunted Happenings, and a medium said to me, the first time I'd met this medium, and she said to me, "I know you." And I said, "No, you don't." She says, "No." She says, "I've been told by a guard in the galleries tonight that he's told me that he knows you and you've seen him." Thought that was and they told me where I'd seen him and what he was wearing. I thought, and I'd never met this medium before. That was the most bizarre experience. So yeah, they kind of like, if you go to, I feel that if you go to a building a lot, then the spirits that are there, that are active spirits, certainly can get to know you. Absolutely.
That's kind of what I meant. That's what I meant by the residing spirits rather than I mean, residual obviously aren't going to get to know you because they're stone tape, etc. But the spirits that live there, that are interactive and, you know, might be a bit shy. Normally, if they get to know you and know that you're a respectful, decent person, they're more likely to come and say hello. Would you say that seeing that apparition with the red jacket on and everything is your most memorable experience whilst investigating, or is there others?
No, there's many others, many others, and that's what I'm saying. They just surprise me so much. You think you've seen it, and then something else has happened. But a lot has happened in the galleries on a personal basis. A lot of it is personal experiences rather than capturing it on film, photos. I tend to go for the personal experiences because spirit can sometimes be very subtle. Mm-hmm. They can sometimes try and get your attention in ways that you don't think they can. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes when you go on an investigation, for me personally, it's about getting in the moment, trying to get enough energy, create enough energy, speak, let them hear your voice. So only one recently, we were in the lovely big court, the beautiful court there, and there was just me and my husband on our own, and I just happened to look up on the viewing gallery, and there was a door open, and there was a light which we've never seen before, and all of a sudden, both me and my husband saw this small shadow just run out of the doorway, run across the viewing gallery, and disappear. So we literally ran around the front, said to Glenn, the lovely man on the door, "We need to go upstairs." He came running with us, and there was absolutely nobody on that viewing gallery. So we knew nobody was there. And it's just things like that where you think, "Oh, blimey, what have I just seen?" And then it creates more questions, doesn't it, after that? And then you just want more and more and more. Very addictive. Very addictive.
It is. So, other than the galleries, because I know that's one of your favourite places to go, yes, where would you say your other favourite has been to investigate?
Well, because I work for Haunted Happenings, obviously we have so many locations across the country, and they're just places that you wouldn't normally be able to go in the day. Okay, so one of my other ones is East Drive, which is obviously quite popular at the moment.
Yeah.
But when we went to East Drive, what we try to do, certainly with the guests that come on, the events with us, we try and give them the experience to enable them to experience the paranormal. Obviously, you can't make the paranormal happen. You've got to try and get the right, try to just give everything and just call out and ask them to do something. And we were at East Drive, and I've got this fascination that whenever I'm in a room, I have to make sure that I shut the door so I know that the door is completely shut, because I know that spirit can open doors. And we were in the bedroom, the big bedroom, and I was on the floor, and I'd shut the door deliberately tight, and I just said, "Spirit, if you're here, please open the door." And the blooming door opened completely, shut across the room. And I know for a fact there was nobody, because we do quite controlled vigils and only small vigils, so we know exactly where everybody is in the location, so we know that if there's any experience, we know that it's as contained as we can possibly
get. East Drive, the size of it, you can't have a lot of people there, can you? Otherwise it gets far too cramped.
We don't anyway, the maximum is 10 people on our vigils anyway, so that's a really good group, and a lot of them are extremely, interested in what we do. So I knew for a fact that there was nobody on the outside, and then obviously you then shout, is there anybody there? You double check, you check with your colleagues, make sure they're not there. Yeah. That was quite interesting. And then not so long after, we was again in the bedroom, and me and my husband could hear footprints footsteps just coming along, and came into the room quite distinct, and it's like, wow, that we know for a fact that that's not anybody this side of life, if that makes sense. So there's Warwick Castle, which is both amazing. You get to see these properties that are just, you don't normally get to see them. And when it's at night time, as you know, it's very quiet. The atmosphere changes.
Everyone's there for the same reason. They're not just there because mum or dad have dragged them there, or the wife has dragged them there, or the husband has dragged them there. You know, they want to be there. They want to. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've said to people. They go, "You're mad," and it's like you imagine going into these places where you've normally got 100, 200, 300 people milling around, and there's you and say 15 others. And you've got your run of it if it's a good group you're with.
It's amazing. Shrewsbury Prison is one of the best as well for that. That is an amazing place. Shrewsbury Prison. We went there, and obviously we try and get our guests involved as much as they possibly can. And we were there, and they were in the they're actually in the cells on one of the wings, and one of the gentlemen at the end, he was shouting me. He shouts, Julie, can you let me out? I went running down, and the lock on the door had actually locked, so I couldn't open the door. And it's like, well, I know that I'm the only one that's outside of this door, and it's been locked, you know. So I opened the door, and this big 6-foot person comes running out saying there was somebody in there with me, Julie, you know. So yeah, it's just, oh my goodness, the experiences that we've had are just amazing. And it's just all these locations, they all have their own story to tell, you know. And because we have small groups, and because we're all passionate about what we do, you know, a lot of things happen, and we have lots of experience, but very addictive. So once you go on one, you want a little bit more, don't you? And a little bit more. Lots of locations that I can talk about. Bolsover Castle is one of my favourites as well.
I've heard that from a lot of different groups that I've spoken to. Warwick Castle is one of their favourite places. The other one is Lancaster Castle, gets a lot of positive.
Course, that's the Pendle Witches.
Pendle Witches, yeah.
We do the Pendle Witches weekend, and that again, is that
with Simon Entwistle?
Yes.
We did a show with him not so long ago, and I had to keep trying to remind myself to speak because he's such a good storyteller. I was just like sitting listening and thinking, oh no, this is meant to be an interview. I'm meant to be talking as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's nice, isn't it, to get somebody that gives you knowledge of the history of obviously the witches, you know, because when we go there, it's not just about the castle. It's about, obviously, you've got the witches, the Pendle Witches on the moors, you know, and we were able to go there. So, you know, ghost hunting, looking for spirits. It's not just always it's not always in a house somewhere. You know, you can have spirits on land and different places. They're everywhere. And it's the history. I love the history of these places as well. The layers and layers of history.
Yeah, when I was approached to do this show, Julie, when they said, would you like to do a show? What would you like it to be on? And I was like, well, I love history. I love my history. That's kind of how they originally found me, because I was at a old US Air Force base, and I was telling them about the history of the bombers that would have been based there, and I like the paranormal. Yes. And to me, the two do go hand in hand, hence Haunted Histories, because, you know, I can understand why, say, a medium at a place doesn't want to know about the history of the place, because if they know about the history of the place, and even guess to a point, they can be have preconceptions as to what they're going to experience and stuff. I can't not do that, because my history knowledge is reasonably good anyway. Just generally, I'm going to know rough things. Yeah, I do this. So, but yeah, I'm a bit sort of, if we go on holiday, especially in the UK, it's like, right, we're going to visit this place, this place, this place, and yeah, my 7-year-old has started watching Horrible Histories, and he's getting into it now. So, I'm working with magic.
Absolutely, it is the history. That the history is really important, you know, to learn. And obviously, you know, you've got the land and, you know, things like that. But I do feel that when you go into a property, you know, don't necessarily go in thinking, well, you know, there's a history of this spirit and there's a history of this spirit. I don't go in at all with any preconception of picking up anything at all for any spirits. I go in there because I don't want to miss the spirits that are there, if that makes sense, you know.
I think it's the thing. It's like with Warwick Castle. People go there expecting the Kingmaker to appear, for example, because he's one of the iconic figures. It's not likely to be the Kingmaker. It's likely to be one of his servants or one of his foot soldiers or It's not going to be necessarily famous names. In most cases, it's your Joe Bloggs. It's the person who worked there, who lived there, who experienced stuff there.
Well, yeah, it is actually. And we had an experience there which was rather interesting because sometimes with Haunted Happenings we are allowed to go because we work there. Hazel lets us go and investigate on our own, which is wonderful. Absolutely. And we learn, it's part of your development as well. And we went there once and because obviously I'm a developing medium myself. And we met a guard. We met some dogs. It's bizarre, but obviously there are spirit animals, absolutely. So yes, you can go into a location, and the spirit that you actually encounter is not necessarily the spirit that you think is there. So it's very important to be open-minded without a doubt.
I agree.
But think about the land as well and what was on there, not yesterday or the next year, last year, or maybe 100 years ago. You've got to go back a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So if you could go anywhere to investigate, anywhere in the world, money and access is no object. Yeah. Where would you like to go?
There's two places in England: Tower of London, obviously, and Gettysburg Battlefield.
Two of which I've done shows on.
Yep, definitely.
We did Gettysburg a few weeks ago with a tour guide. She does tours round there, haunted tours. Cheryl Sefcik. Yeah, it was a very interesting one because I learnt stuff about it. Obviously, at the moment in the States, they're going through the whole people are ripping down Confederate statues, and we actually did sort of discuss that. And If you're interested in Gettysburg, definitely have a listen because there was stuff in that show that I was quite surprised to learn about it. Yeah, I can understand that. And Tower of London, that is a common one. It is a common one. See, I'd like to do Windsor Castle if anything, if I was going to get to one of the palaces.
Well, Hampton Court would be good, wouldn't it? I think the fact that you've not, unfortunately, it would cost absolutely hundreds and hundreds to hire out. I don't even know whether or not it's allowed.
You're not allowed to. The royal palaces won't let you because I do actually know someone who's a yeoman warder at the Tower of London, and I spoke to him about it. He went, you wouldn't be allowed to. They have a blanket ban on it for all the royal palaces, unfortunately. So, but yeah, they would be coups. That would be a big coup to get one of those. But hold that thought. We're just going to have a quick 30-second break so people can go and get a drink or whatever. And when we come back, I'm actually going to ask you to start describing the galleries to us because I've looked at pictures online because I've not had the chance to go there yet. It's on my to-do list. Yes. But some of the places that people describe in there, such as the caves and the pits and the dungeons, it sounds like a horror story waiting to be described. So when we get back from the quick break, if you can start sort of describing these little bits to us and what it looks like as you walk in, and then we can start talking about some of the experiences there, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
And we're back. Still joined by Julie from Haunted Happenings, and we've been talking about sort of different investigations and favourite investigations and all that kind of thing. And now we're going to focus a bit on the Galleries of Justice. Now, it almost sounds, when somebody first said to me, "Have you ever heard of the Galleries of Justice?" I thought that doesn't sound very ominous. That sounds quite sort of nice. Until I started looking into it and realised that it was actually somewhere in the late 1700s, early 1800s, you could be held in the prisons there, tried in the courts there, and then executed there as well. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes. Although there was actually only 11 people that were actually hung at the Galleries of Justice.
Right.
and there was 10 on the front steps, and there was one in the yard after it was, banned as a public execution. But yes, and those 11 people are actually buried in the actual yard of.
Hello. Right, sorry about that. That sounds a bit disjointed, but we've been having some electrical storms here, and I think it just threw Skype out slightly. But Julie was just saying that. Did you say it was all 11 were all buried?
Yes, 11 gentlemen. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So as I started looking into it more, it started to I could start to see why there would be almost like a gruesome fascination with the place. But what do you walk into when you walk in through those big double doors? What do you see?
Well, you go into the main reception area, okay? Mm-hmm. And in the main reception area, in the middle of it, is literally in the middle of two courts. You have the Crown Court on the left-hand side, which dealt with all of the trials, and on the right-hand side, it's the Civil Court, okay? Mm-hmm. So you literally walk in, and when it comes to a lot of the investigations, they tend to go off towards the Crown Court, the Crown Court, and in that Crown Court there were all of the the trials of the people that were actually hung there. And it hasn't. There was a great fire in 1876 which caused a lot of damage to the actual building, and unfortunately a lot of the wood was burnt and it had to be rebuilt. Yeah. But that area where they were actually tried after that, so we know. And the reason that I know all of this is purely because of the history. I've actually had many conversations with Bev Baker, who's the curator of the building, who has actually confirmed all of this information for me, because I wanted to know the true history of a building, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because everybody says something and they add something on, and I thought to myself, no, actually, I want to know the real truth about this wonderful building. So I've had many conversations with that lovely lady, and she's given me a lot of history of the building. Mm-hmm. So once you actually go into the Crown Court, that was actually, not so long ago, it was actually still being used, and they also had a lot of film in there as well, of films and things like that there. But then when literally you've got the judge at the end who literally put the black cap on, and basically give out the death penalty, then they would then go down the stairs. But yes, you are right, it wasn't actually a jail, it was actually a holding jail, and they used to have quarterly sessions every year. So unfortunately, if you committed a crime and you came in on the next day after the judge had gone to another city, you had to literally wait there 3 months. Mm-hmm. So no, it wasn't a holding prison, like prison where you would stay for years and years. It was literally one where you could just have the death penalty, literally go down and be hung and then be buried. As simple as that, Mm-hmm. So you literally go into the building, you go down into the cells. When you actually walk down, you go through the corridors, you actually go to where the turnkey was, because obviously if you went in there, you would have your hair removed because of lice, obviously, you would have all of your money and possessions taken off you. If you could pay the turnkey some money, you might get a bed and you might get decent food. It all depends on, because he was basically the person that ruled the jail, he was the one that looked after the prisoners. Yeah. So you literally went to him first, and then you go down these lovely steps and you go down to the 1833 cells, which is basically a men's block. And that was built in 1833 to house the men, overnight. So they used to sleep in literally used to sleep in those. But then you actually, if you turn left, you then end up going down towards the ladies' area. Mm-hmm. There wasn't that many ladies actually in there, that, believe it or not. It wasn't a lot of ladies, but they were there. And there was a very famous case of one lady that actually escaped. She actually jumped over the fence, fell, broke her leg, and managed to get away, and they never found her. And that's going back sort of 1800s. And then you then go down. It's layers, it's layers upon layers have got history. So then you then start going down further, which is where it gets to be quite nasty and not very nice. Mm-hmm. You've got an exercise yard where, again, you've literally got the lime pit, and you can actually see on the side of the walls, you can actually see their tombstones and the names of the people that were there. Okay.
Right.
And one of them is very interesting, a gentleman called William Saville, who was hung outside on the steps of the Shire Hall, and he unfortunately murdered his wife and children in Colic Woods, and he was taken there. And unfortunately what happened was that many people wanted to watch this execution, which was quite interesting because at the time a child wasn't allowed to go into a public house but was allowed to watch an execution, which was quite bizarre for the time. Unfortunately, when this gentleman was hung, there was a great surge to actually watch him, and unfortunately people were trampled, and unfortunately people died. Many of them were children. So unfortunately that was a very sorry event on that day. And that's quite sad, you know.
Yeah.
He's there, but also if you ever go and visit the place, if you have a look on the outside in the actual yard, you'll see where people have scribed in the walls, you know, all of their names and where they lived and what the dates that they're in there, and they're still there for us all to see. So just in that lovely yard where the male prisoners used to come down every day, and they were allowed to play instruments, they were allowed to play cards, and then at the night time they would go back up to the overnight cells.
Right.
You've then got a little bit where it goes a lot deeper, which is where they have the debtor's cell, because obviously a lot of people going back, you know, a couple of hundreds of years, they would be put in prison for owing money, obviously. And to get out, they had to pay, but they didn't have any money. So it was a catch-22 situation. And as you go in, there are actual pits. And these are the pits that you really don't want to be in. And you actually go down, and there are two big pits. And unfortunately, you cannot go in them now. You used to be able to many years ago, but you can't now. My husband's actually been in them, and they're not very nice at all. But then you have got the cells, the two dark cells, which are the cells where you would come out if you was going to be hung. These are the cells that you would spend your last night in.
So what were the pits used for?
The pits were used for transportation,
right,
and waiting for transportation. And there is also a case where many years ago there was a penal reformer that went round the prisons, and they shouldn't have been left in the pit, but he did. There's a very good history book of the Galleries of Justice, and in there it actually tells you of when he went and visited, and nobody should have been in those pits for a long time, but unfortunately there was a gentleman that had literally been left in there, and he was immediately taken out, and the jail was actually in lots of trouble because of that. Right. So they wait for transportation, and you would literally go down and just be waiting, just literally wait in these pits, and you can actually see them now, and they're just horrible limestone pits, cold, damp, not very nice at all. And then just above the two pits you have literally got the two dark cells where there's a very small entrance, because as you come out that entrance you have to bend down. So as you bend down to come out, the jailer would then put the black mask over you and take you to be hung. Right. And also there's actually something quite funny actually on the way down, because as you go down one of the little corridors, it actually goes in slimmer and slimmer. And I've often wondered, well, what's that about? And apparently it's actually to clean the prisoners. So as they walk down, the actual stone actually goes and just scrapes the dirt off the prisoners as they go into those cells.
Early exfoliation. You
can imagine how they were and how dirty they were because the horrid conditions. So you've got those two, but then as you go further down into the Shire Hall, you've then got the chapel, which they now know as a chapel. There is also an oubliette there as well, which you can actually see. And obviously, speaking to Bev, she can't give me a lot of information about the medieval cave that's down there. All she has said is that she does know that there was often women put in there, which is quite sad. And also people that weren't basically obeying the rules, they were chucked in there as punishment. but there is a chapel there as well. So you have literally got layers upon layers of history of that building. So as you walk around, you can understand why you feel despair, can't you? You can understand that. You know, and even in the ladies' bit, you know, you go into the ladies' bit that had all their hair shaved off, they would have sold that hair. You know, you're literally in the rags that they give you, and you've literally got to cook and clean all the time, you know, for just little silly things. You know, children were put in there for, you know, for pinching handkerchiefs and things like that. Straight in there, you know. It was quite ruthless, ruthless.
They were. I mean, the bit when I was talking in my first bit, I was saying about people who got 5 years or something for stealing a slice of bacon.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
Know, 5 years hard labour. A young woman who got 5 years hard labour for stealing a slice of bacon. Yeah, ironically, a woman who threw acid over her husband, believe it or not, got 7 years and got let off after 3.
Absolutely.
You know, it kind of doesn't really make sense, does it? So, I mean, I've been reading on some of the accounts on sort of different things I could find on blog pages and everything about people who've investigated the place, and the cells. Yes, I heard of those, and the pits. I heard those are meant to be quite. They were talking about those being quite eerie.
Yes.
But someone also mentioned a laundry room.
Yes, there is a laundry room. It's where the ladies go in, and they literally go, and it's a laundry room, and there's like little bits where, for instance, the doctor would have been, because obviously they would, when they go in, they would have been looked at to see how healthy they were. There is also literally a big wooden it's like kind of like a circle, and you just go in, and it's just basically to de-flea you as well.
Right.
And then you've got one room. There's just one room where all the women would have literally been all in one go. They would have all lived in the one bed in that place. But there wasn't that many women actually in there. But there was women in there, you know, and they went and they had the carbolic soap, you know, the bath's still there. So when you actually go in, to think that when you're actually in there and all you've got is the tiniest little area outside, a little yard, it's the tiniest yard you've ever seen. So yeah, there was women in there, absolutely there was, but not for a long time, and a lot of it was just, you know, like you've just said, you know, just little things that they shouldn't have done, which compared to now is just, you know, ridiculous, but you know, they had to go and be punished for it.
So when you've been there, are there any areas of the gallery that you actually feel very uncomfortable going into?
If I'm honest, no. I've never. The only time that I've ever, if I'm honest, when I go on an investigation, I never get scared, and I don't know why, and I just think it's because I trust myself and I trust them.
Yeah.
But there is one place, and also if something's happening, I will go towards it. I'll never back away, because this is what I want. This is what my passion is about. Yeah. However, there is a little bit of a story, and in the medieval cave, and one it was actually, funny enough, it was my birthday, and I kind of, when we went in, I said, oh, you know, come on, Spirit, can you do something? You know, it's my birthday, come on. And on the way out, we went down, we did, obviously our lovely guest had gone, and once they've gone, finished the event, we go and pick up all of our equipment, and we just happened to go down to the cave, the medieval cave, and on the way out, as I always say hello to spirits, I always say goodbye, I have respect for them. I just happened to say goodbye, thank you, and behind me was a growl, a real deep growl, and a laugh straight after it. And I kind of went, oh, okay, fine. You know, there was nobody else there. My husband had gone out, and it was a kind of, I'm trying to scare you, but I'm having a laugh. That's the only time where I thought, okay, fine. I don't get scared. It's not a very nice place, you know, and I have investigated on my own. Many times I'm allowed to investigate and go down and, you know, lock myself away and investigate. But yeah, I would say that maybe the cells aren't very nice. The 1833 cells aren't very nice. But obviously you've got energy, haven't you? You've got residual energy of people in despair. It's bound to linger, isn't it? You know, it's bound.
Are we talking about the death cells, basically?
No, this would be the believe it or not, the 1833, the overnight cells. I kind of find there's a lot of energy in there as well.
Right.
But yeah, and the pits. That, although you can't get into the pits at the moment, if you think about what they would have gone through, it's horrendous, isn't it? It's not nice at all. Not nice at all.
So what sort of, say in somewhere like near where I call them the death cells because I can't think of anything else to call them, where the prison execution row, death row,
Yes.
whatever you want to call it.
The overnight cells. Yeah. No, it would be the death cells. Yeah.
So the death row cells. Have you ever picked up anything there that sort of would give you an idea as to how those people were feeling? Or, I mean, you're saying that the overnight cells seem to have more melancholy attached to them than anywhere else.
Yeah, they do, believe it or not. When I was the only what I have been when we've been in there in the actual dark cells. What we tend to do is, certainly with our guests, is a lot of people experience because you can actually lay down in the one, or the second one you can't get in, but the first one you can. You've got the facility to actually lay down. So if you lay down there, a lot of our guests, there's a lot of people that actually struggle with their chest and feel very tight on their chest. And it's interesting that you can get guests on different occasions, different events that feel the same thing. I've had that many times. For me personally, I've not experienced anything in there, but I do know that our guests have experienced it. So if I'm down there doing a vigil, I will deliberately say, go and lay on that actual piece of wood. Tell me what you think. And a lot of them do feel this heaviness on their chest. What's that? Is that an energy from somebody that's lying there thinking, tomorrow I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to be hung, and I know I'm going to be hung. I don't know, but it's very interesting that our guests do have it on different events. When you've got guests having the same experience at different times
who haven't spoken to each other, or
different events, then it's kind of, you're thinking, are they picking up on this? And I must admit, when I'm working for Haunted Happenings, I kind of like, obviously we need to give our guests their own experience, but sometimes what you try and do is, if you know that there has been previous experiences, then we try and put our guests in that environment just to see if they pick it up. It's interesting if you do have different people picking up the same thing, same emotion and things like that. Absolutely. But people pick up on different areas, don't they? One person can pick up on nothing in one area, yet somebody else can pick up something in completely different, and it's just personal experiences.
So which is your favourite part of the galleries?
It's the medieval cave, without a doubt. Just purely because I've got EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon, in there, and I've recorded that, and I've had quite a lot of experiences in there. A lot of debunking, do that, don't we? The tram in Nottingham, a few years ago, we was doing investigations, and every so often you could hear this rumbling, and it was, oh my goodness, what was it? Then I kind of thought, that's every 5 minutes. Oh, it's the tram. It's the trams going by. So you have, as long as you're debunking all the time, but yeah, definitely. But it doesn't frighten me, but I do feel that there is energy in there, certainly. And again, I've got EVPs from a certain gentleman that talks a certain way. And, again, I've had them on different experiences, and our guests have experienced him as well, which is
so without telling us his name, to spoil it for anyone who goes there, because in case they meet him, what sort of things has he said?
Well, first of all, we did the ghost box once. I went with my two friends, and we were there, and we just did this. We was just doing this calling out on the ghost box, and I kind of, something happened, and I can remember me saying, oh my goodness, that just sounds so rude, as in somebody being cheeky. And all of a sudden, you just heard this voice come back saying, it is. And it was so clear. And it was like, wow, where did that come from? And that kind of started it off. And then I've kind of gone on my own and done the EVPs. And I've got EVPs with this gentleman. He talks a certain way. And I've said to him, my name is Julie, and then he's given me his name. And then I've got one where I was there for about an hour, and I got absolutely nothing at all. And I said, oh, please, are you here? And all you can hear quite loudly is, I'm here. And I thought, my goodness. And it was just wonderful to know.
Was this the same voice as the time you heard before?
The same man, the same voice on different occasions. And it's not just me that's heard him. I've been there with guests that have also heard him. And when that happens, it's a privilege. It's a privilege
But you know his name now as well.
Absolutely. He has told me his name, and he's told me his name on 2 separate occasions. And whenever I go, sometimes I'll go there and I don't get anything. And sometimes I'll go and I'll get his voice. And it's very distinct. And as soon as I hear him, I know he's there. And it's just such a privilege to think that he's communicating with us. Yeah. It's full.
So if anyone was going to... Wait, do you know when the next Haunted Happenings trip to the galleries is? Is there one coming up?
There will be one coming up. There's always one coming up because it's one of our most popular events. Absolutely. But yes, I'm just finding that out for you and letting you know. But yes,
and you tend to host it, do you, Julie?
No, I don't host. I go now. I'm able to go as a medium because lovely Hazel lets me develop, personally, which is wonderful. She gives me the chance to do this, which is absolutely wonderful.
She's a very giving person, isn't she? That's the impression I've got from talking to her.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the more we develop as people, the more that we can help, other people have experiences. Yeah. My husband and the lovely team were there on Saturday, just gone. So yes, there will be one coming up soon. Absolutely.
So just go on the Haunted Happenings Facebook page or the website, and you'll see where and they'll get a chance to come and say hello to you if they're able to come along.
If I'm there, sometimes I can be there, sometimes I can't be there. It might be my husband. It's just whoever's there, you'll always get somebody that's professional and somebody that really is passionate about what they do. So it doesn't matter if it's me or it's my husband, and anybody that is there that works for HH. We're so passionate about what we do and privileged that you are guaranteed to get that experience. Lovely. You're not guaranteed to, have anything paranormal because we're not we're not there. We don't fake anything. Everything is genuine, and that can take a long time. It can take 5 minutes, but we guarantee that we can give you we can give you the tools to experience something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's what I always say, you can never guarantee that the ghosts will come out to play. But you can guarantee if it's going to be a professional, fun experience, if nothing else. So,
and it is fun. It is fun as well because spirit like laughing. They like energy.
I call it the Monsters Inc. theory.
Absolutely.
Laughter produces more energy than fear, which is why if I can crack a joke and get people who are a bit scared laughing, not while things are happening. Obviously, while things are happening, quiet, take it on board. But if you're trying to G up the energy and people are getting a bit nervous because the lights have gone out or whatever, crack a joke. And you can guarantee something is going to happen quite soon afterwards when you've got sort of 10, 15 people corpsing on the floor because they're laughing so hard. But
absolutely.
Thank you ever so much for your time, Julia. I really appreciate talking to you.
Can I just let you know that the next event at the galleries is actually, believe it or not, Friday the 13th of October. So how fabulous is that if you want to go there? Fabulous.
That would be a good one, wouldn't it?
That would, actually. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
So I've loved it. Thank you very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
You're very, very welcome. You're very, very welcome. But just before we close down the show, I will just say that don't forget Parasearch has shows on every night of the week covering everything paranormal and unexplained. You can listen to them as well after the event on Spreaker, and I believe we're also on YouTube. But all that leaves me to say is good night, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.